Tonight, going it alone, Israel defies President Biden and smashes into Hamas's last stronghold. The danger for us of an American president nobody listens to. Liar, liar. Trump prosecutors call their star witness Monday. How can they make the jury believe convicted felon and ex-Trump lawyer Michael Cohen? And summer rage. Student protests forced the DNC to make major changes for their Chicago convention. How 2024 is already shaping up to be worse than 1968. Welcome to the Ferris Show on television. Tonight we are in Chicago. We're glad to have you along. First thing to tackle, the return to normal. And normal is a good thing. We're not talking about COVID. We're just talking about life. And think about 2024, not in the sense of how screwed up things are, but in the sense that things are actually getting a lot better. We're getting back to normal. Just today, Target stopped selling Pride gear in most of the stores after last summer's backlash. Last summer, they had, quote, tuck-it swimsuits for kids. And if you question such things, you were called transphobic. Now they're all gone, back to normal. The past 4 years proved too much for even noted liberals like Jerry Seinfeld, who now says wokeness is killing comedy.
This is the result of the extreme left and PC crap and people worrying so much about offending other people. Mm-hmm. When you write a script and it goes into 4 or 5 different hands, committees, groups, here's our thought about this joke, well, that's the end of your comedy.
During 2020, mobs looted American downtowns for weeks. It's taken a few weeks, yes, but college presidents have had enough with protests and protest tents. Cops actually are enforcing some laws in 2024, a return to normal. That's new. It's refreshing. If you think when the backlash really started, we'll go back a year ago. Dylan Mulvaney, the Bud Light trans influencer failure. You don't hear anything from Dylan Mulvaney anymore, and Bud Light's still groveling without much success. Sales still have not recovered. A few years ago, people talked about removing the Jefferson Memorial because he once owned slaves. Now a school district in Virginia is literally going back to normal and is renaming schools to remind people of their history.
There was a vote that happened in Virginia. A school board voted to restore the names of 2 schools that previously were named after 2 Confederate figures.
It's been nearly 4 years since the schools' names were changed from Stonewall Jackson High to Mountain View High and Ashby Lee Elementary to Honey Run Elementary.
A concerned resident argued restoring these names is like going back to 1959, a year they say rooted in mass resistance and Jim Crow segregation.
All right, here's a new one. Democrats want to secure the border. Back when running for president in 2020, Joe Biden then, you might remember, he suggested that securing the border was racist. Now listen.
We're examining whether or not I have that power. I would have that power under the legislation when the border has over 500,000 people, 5,000 people a day trying to cross the border because you can't manage it, slow it up. There's no guarantee that I have that power all by myself without legislation. And someone suggested I should just go ahead and try it. And if I get shut down by the court, I get shut down by the court. But we're trying to work through that right now.
That's very different. It almost sounds like something Donald Trump would say. The pendulum is swinging back hard. The left keeps pushing Joe Biden farther and farther to the left. The left's scorn and dislike of normal is growing. With us now, Bachungar Sargon, opinion editor for Newsweek, author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. Thank you for being with us. And that may be the point, right? And I'm glad you're here. You're the perfect guest for this. The left's, the elite scorn and dislike of normal, of working class, of traditional America. The scorn keeps growing. The rhetoric keeps getting hotter in terms of how bad and how shameful normal, traditional value Americans are. And now traditional Americans don't seem to care.
Thank you so much for having me on the Ferris Show on television, Leland. It's great to be here with you on this Friday. You're absolutely right. When you say things are going back to normal, I think what you actually mean is that institutions, politicians, corporations realize that the Democrats are about to get spanked by the average American, including people who were Democrats very recently, because they are sick of being sneered at by these leftist elites who, for the last decade, have controlled the messaging of the Democratic Party, most of which consisted of calling average people racist. And in the light of the impending doom, you often see Democrats start to wake up from their stupor. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is they know that Joe Biden is polling terribly. And as a result, they're starting to think, well, what are we doing wrong here? And that contempt for the average American is a big part of it.
All right, so are they actually thinking, though, what are we doing wrong, or are they doubling down on exactly what you just talked about, the contempt? Here's Jen Psaki on MSNBC.
I do think that there is some leverage that we are all seeing being used. Should it have been used earlier? I think the answer is yes to that. But we are seeing them hold back in the sending of weapons. That's actually a pretty significant sign, given that the United States and Israel has a long-standing connection on military support, where the United States is a big provider of that.
All right, so Jen Psaki of MSNBC on Stephen Colbert talking about how, in fact, Joe Biden should have done more to placate, assuage, pick your word, the far left of the Democratic Party.
See, these people don't know any average Americans. They don't know any working class Americans. And so it's extremely mysterious to them what working class people want. They think it's like this, they're in the dark. They're like, well, we know that it's not working what we're doing. Maybe let's try turning on Israel, despite the fact that 80% of Americans back Israel. They just don't know any regular Americans. And when I was traveling around the country for my book, Second Class, what I found was, and we've talked about this many times, there is huge consensus in the working class of what people want to see. They want a strong border. They want good health care. They don't want us sending money to Ukraine, but they do really like Israel. They're pro-gay, but they're really worried about trans stuff. I mean, it's not rocket science. They are deeply tolerant, radically moderate people. And for some reason, this is beyond the ability of the elites to understand, because they have all been educated in a way that teaches them to have contempt for this exact kind of moderate tolerance.
Yeah, deeply tolerant, radically moderate. Got to think about that, but it's an important point, because you can be both. And so often the middle is mistaken for kind of not caring and being apathetic. Swing state voters on Biden's liberalism. So this is swing state voters. This is not the coasts, if you will. It's certainly not the people in New York or in Washington. 36% say too liberal or progressive, 11% not liberal or progressive enough, 47% in the middle, which is kind of what you would think. I think you made a good point, right? Is that the power, especially in 2020 and going into 2021, 2022, is that, if you didn't bend to the knee of anti-racism, you were racist. If you wanted a secure southern border and to have legal immigration rather than just people flooding across, you were xenophobic. If you didn't want boys in your daughter's locker room, you were transphobic. And calling people those words had power. Now it doesn't seem to have power anymore, right?
That's exactly right. And I think you're seeing that with the campus protesters. The vast majority of Americans, including the majority of young people, are totally disgusted by their behavior. And it's because the way they chose to go about, quote unquote, supporting the Palestinian people was in the most aggressive, most gross, let's lean into the most violent language way, which is how college educated people with a lot of contempt for the average person go about doing things. And it has no purchase anymore, because people look at that and it just reminds them of the way that they were bullied over the trans issue, the way they were bullied over the race issue, the way they were bullied over climate change, when they know that they are good-hearted people. When you say to a not racist, good-hearted, tolerant person, you are racist if you don't do exactly what I want, that does not fly anymore.
See, that was the answer. That right there. That said everything. Stick around for a second, because I think what we're about to say sort of ties into this. I want to get your thoughts. Nothing shows what we were just talking about, other than Batya's answer, which was perfect. But the left's reaction to Hillary Clinton on MSNBC tells us a lot.
I have had many conversations, as you have had, with a lot of young people over the last many months now. And you're right. They don't know very much at all about the history of the Middle East or, frankly, about history in many areas of the world, including in our own country.
And then she gave a history lesson about the Middle East and an offer that was made to the Palestinians by Israel that would have resulted in a Palestinian state had the Palestinians simply accepted it.
But with respect to the Middle East, they don't know that under the bringing together of the Israelis and the Palestinians by my husband, an offer was made to the Palestinians for a state on 96% of the existing territory occupied by the Palestinians, with 4% of Israel to be given to reach 100%. And if Yasser Arafat had accepted it, there would have been a Palestinian state now for about 24 years.
And she left out, perhaps, I don't have the whole soundbite, but for the record, there's been, half a dozen other times the Israelis have offered such concessions and been turned down by either the Palestinians or the Arabs. Big names on the left, though, trashed Clinton for her comments. It's hard to believe that her political style, obvious, overwhelming contempt for voters, potential voters, or really just anyone who isn't her, proved unsuccessful in 2016. First of all, you're wrong. Many young people have a much more accurate view of the Middle East than you do. Second of all, it doesn't take a PhD in Middle East history to oppose babies being starved and bombed by the thousands. It just takes some basic humanity, something you clearly lack. And when I wrote this, I wrote it as a rhetorical question, but I think Batya may be better equipped to answer it than I am rhetorically. So Batya is back with us. There's actually a question here, and a fair question to ask. Was Hillary Clinton wrong?
About the students not knowing the history?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Leland. Even the ones who know that, they don't care, because in their worldview, which is the woke worldview, it's not just that facts and history don't matter. It's that there's no difference between right versus wrong. There's only the difference between who has more power and who has less power. And if you are the party with less power, as the Palestinians are, you have no agency in their mind. And so you cannot accept or reject a peace deal because you are a quote unquote person of color who has no ability to act, no agency whatsoever. And everything bad you do is Israel's fault because they have more power. The way that we believe in fact and in the law of gravity, they believe in the law of wokeness. Virtue exists for anyone who has less power, even if they are Hamas. That is their worldview. And so it's sort of irrelevant what opportunities the Palestinians have been given. In the woke worldview, they have no responsibility to act morally at all.
Right, which sort of, I guess, it dovetailed, right, from 2020. People who were looting stores, they had no responsibility to act morally as well. Then it applies to terrorists in 2024, hence the pendulum swinging back. Batya, thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, you too, Leland.
Yeah, thank you. Last night, we told you that both Presidents Reagan and H.W. Bush threatened to cut off arms to Israel. But back then, the Israelis listened. This time around, they told Joe Biden to pound sand. Why President Biden's demands keep falling on deaf ears. And convicted felon Michael Cohen, come on down. The witnesses in the Trump trial, the star witness. The star witness is a man who's lied in court, lied on TV, even lied in the Senate. Is the prosecution's case about to go from bad to worse? Live pictures of the Israel-Gaza border. It is pretty dark there, a little past 2 o'clock in the morning. The Israeli War Cabinet told President Biden to go pound sand. They didn't have to use words. They actually did what you do in the Middle East. They used actions. The Israeli army headed deeper into Hamas's lost stronghold in southern Gaza, despite threats by President Biden to withhold military aid if Israel went into Rafah. Robert Sherman is our man in Tel Aviv, where it is already early Saturday morning. Hi, Robert.
Hey there, Leland. Yeah, with that approval coming down from the War Cabinet, this landscape is going to be changing a bit. We've seen most of the Israeli operations taking place in East Rafah and near the Rafah crossing, but now you see these humanitarian corridors that the Israelis are opening up, trying to push people towards Han Yunis and the coastline. It is anticipated Israeli forces will be making a move a bit more closer towards the Mediterranean at some point here. We also do know of one operation that took place today. A pair of barrages were fired by Hamas towards southern Israel earlier today. So the Israelis were knocking out launch positions in Rafah. One of those rockets actually making impact in a playground in southern Israel. And one of the things to note here, Leland, is that you are feeling the pressure intensifying here in Israel when it comes to humanitarian situation to get more aid inside of the enclave there. It is true at this hour, the Rafah crossing is still closed. The Kerem Shalom crossing bombed for the 4th time this week, still open at this hour. Leland.
Yeah, and to be clear, it was bombed by Hamas. A number of Israeli soldiers died, and it's still open to get aid into Gaza as protected by the Israelis. Robert, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Long weekend ahead for Mr. Sherman and his team. The president's actions on Israel have certainly upset a number of Republicans in the House and Senate, but criticism of his actions have crossed the aisle. Been a lot of Democratic donors who are very upset, and there's been a lot of Democratic elected representatives who've been brave enough to speak out about the dangers of President Biden's actions. Brad Schneider is among them, Congressman of Illinois, member of the House Foreign Affairs, Ways and Means Committee, co-chair of the bipartisan Abraham Accords Caucus. It's good to see you, Congressman. Thank you. Just in the past couple of hours from the Associated Press, Biden administration says Israel's use of U.S. arms likely violated international law, but evidence is incomplete. How are we to read the past couple of days as anything other than a move by the Biden administration away from Israel, either to something neutral or something that could certainly be seen as pro-Hamas for perceived domestic political gain?
Well, thanks for having me. And let's be clear, the administration is not moving away from Israel. What the administration is doing is signaling Israel that the U.S. Administration doesn't think Israel should go in a major operation into Rafah on the border with Egypt. They made the decision last week. The Biden administration made the decision to withhold a shipment of weapons. I've criticized that decision. I think it sends the wrong signal, a mixed signal, at a very crucial time. There were rumors that there was a approachment to a agreement to release the hostages, to pause the fighting for a period of time. And Hamas basically sent something that was not what was agreed to, but at least there were discussions going on. And, my concern is that the administration sends mixed signals when they're telling Hamas they have to make an agreement, but telling Israel that they can't finish Hamas off in Rafah. So we need to be clear. We need to be clear-eyed. What's at stake? Hamas started this war on October 7th. As long as Hamas can reign over Gaza and threaten Israel, there will not be peace for either Palestinians or Israelis.
All right, no argument there. But I think the words matter here, and I appreciate the position you're taking. But you've said two things that are kind of contradictory. You've said that the administration isn't moving away from Israel, but they're sending mixed signals to the point that Hamas is emboldened enough to walk away from any kind of talks because they know the U.S. administration is pushing Israel not to go after Hamas. So how is that not moving away from Israel?
Well, President Biden said this week that he supports Israel's right to defend itself. We'll make sure Israel has those defensive weapons. There's a disagreement, a significant disagreement between the Biden administration and the Israeli government with respect to Rafah. And I don't think it's just the government. I think the majority of Israelis recognize that as long as Hamas, as they are doing right as we speak, fire rockets into Israel from Rafah,
Look, Congressman, you get no argument from us in terms of what Hamas is and what Israel needs to do to destroy Hamas. But you zoom out here to a larger picture of the Middle East and the world. The president of the United States, who ran on a position of bringing America back, is now in the dangerous position of the world not listening to him. Vladimir Putin, Joe Biden said this man needs to go. He's still in power. He told Iran, don't. Iran did. He told Israel, don't. Israel did attack Iran. He's now effectively, as you pointed out, protecting Hamas from Israel wiping them out. And Israel says, never mind, we're going in anyway. Is there not a danger in the world not taking the President of the United States seriously anymore?
So I think we see the world differently. I saw Russia invade Ukraine 2 years ago, and I saw the United States, having restored NATO and the confidence of the alliance, hold this alliance together and help Ukraine defend itself against that Russian attack. And just recently, Congress finally, 6 months late, but finally passed aid to send to Ukraine. I saw the President of the United States stand with Israel 11 days after the October 7th attack. President Biden became the first president to go to Israel during a time of war. On April 13th, when Iran did launch more than 350 missiles and drones, the United States worked with Israel, the UK, France, Jordan, as well as other allies in the region, and defeated that attack. And so the president has a perspective, and I agree with him many of the times. I agree with him, disagree with him other times. I think it was a mistake to say they're withholding weapons. But I think at the end of the day, Israel has been getting billions of dollars of weapons from the United States in self-defense to defeat Hamas. The United States has been working with Israel. I've worked as hard as anyone with Israel, with the U.S., with Egypt, others to make sure aid is getting into Gaza. So it's not just a matter of defeating Hamas in this fight, but making sure there's a better future for everyone in the region.
Well, Congressman, there'd be few people probably in office at all who understand how important the U.S.-Israeli relationship is and how important it is for a strong U.S.-Israeli relationship for peace around the world. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you. We wish you a good weekend. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm proud of the U.S.-Israel relationship. I look forward to working to bring peace, not just to Israel, but to the Palestinians, the whole region. That's what we have to keep our eyes on.
That's a good point. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Wrote a lot about this today in War Notes. Obviously, we've tackled it throughout the week. Warnotes.com to sign up for free. It is our first look at the show. Comes out 4 p.m. every day. Gives you our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. It's free to sign up. Warnotes.com. And, of course, we'll hear from you on social media at Leland Vittert on Instagram and that thing that used to be known as Twitter. Katie Oglesby is back on Monday. She is our producer who looks after social media and War Notes. We'll certainly have some of your thoughts to share next week. More than 2 weeks into the Trump business records trial in New York, prosecutors will finally get their star witness. Why Trump's new lawyers can't wait for Trump's old lawyer to testify.
So he lies, and he lies about everything, including his golf game, because he can't hit a ball. He can't hit a ball 100 yards.
The light at the end of the tunnel might actually be upon us. There are only two more witnesses for the prosecution in the Donald Trump business records case. One of them being Michael Cohen, who was the prosecutor's star witness. He allegedly negotiated the deal with Stormy Daniels, funneled the money to her. If one person in the world can testify to Trump falsifying records, which is what he's charged with, or ordering someone else to falsify records, it's this man, Michael Cohen. There's just one problem for the prosecution. Their star witness is a convicted felon. He pleaded guilty to 8 counts, including tax evasion, and worse, House Republicans have referred Cohen to the DOJ for perjury. He's also been permanently disbarred. With us now, Jimena Bustillo, NPR politics reporter, who's in the courtroom today. Michael DeSharo, New York City criminal defense attorney. Michael, you have been waiting months for this cross-examination. You've been talking about it since the indictment came down. What's happening this weekend for the prosecution and for Trump's lawyers ahead of, I guess, the biggest day in court so far for Donald Trump?
I imagine the prosecution is doing some further prepping of Mr. Cohen, and I imagine that the defense is looking through the hours of TikTok lives that Michael Cohen was asked by the judge not to do, and all while wearing a jail Trump T-shirt. I'm sure the prosecutors asked him not to do that, but he continues to do it.
All right. Jimena, have we figured out what the prosecution's strategy is for dealing with a witness who is so fatally flawed?
Well, the strategy has been to not really sugarcoat his personality or his background. That has been front and foremost from the very beginning, from the opening statements. It's known that the defense is going to attempt to discredit him. And at the same time, we have heard various witnesses testify to how difficult Cohen was to work with, how he's aggressive, how he has this, quote, sometimes pants on fire attitude about handling things. Really, no one had nice things to say about Cohen, but I think that in one sense helped the prosecution to show that Cohen maybe wasn't acting alone, which is what they're aiming to do, right? Showing that Cohen isn't going to do something out of, quote, the kindness of his own heart, as we heard someone else say. And so they're not really sugarcoating this either. No one is here assuming that this person is completely absolved of anything.
So, Michael, there was a lot of discussion. You brought this up yesterday, I thought rightly, when it came to Stormy Daniels, that there was a danger for Team Trump of appearing like bullies going after Stormy Daniels, the porn star. And somehow they would look like they were attacking this woman who, for other reasons, had gone to a hotel room with Donald Trump and then accepted a $130,000 payment to say nothing about what happened in the hotel room. Is there the same danger in being really aggressive in going after Michael Cohen on the stand?
When you have a character like Michael Cohen as a cross-examiner, you have to make sure you're not more outlandish than him. You have to be measured. You have to be factual. You have to be precise in your questioning, because he's the type of character that will take conversations away from what you're trying to do. So you can go at him very, very hard, but you have to take, with a guy like Cohen, almost a professorial tone and let him be himself in front of the jury. Because the prosecution, while they put him on the stand, they're going to try to inoculate themselves against some of his shenanigans. They're going to put a guy on the stand, and then they try to walk away from him a little bit. And they'll say things like, well, the other evidence corroborates Cohen. But at a certain point, they need the jury to believe Cohen at some point. And that is the point where the defense will attack, I imagine, in a very measured, lengthy, and intrusive way.
All right, so measured, lengthy, precise, professorial way that you just described, Michael, is not how Donald Trump likes to be seen as being defended, right? And we've seen this. He wants his lawyers to be super aggressive and super in people's faces and go on cable television and pound the desk and on and on and on, and that passing no judgment on that. But have you seen in the courtroom his lawyers be willing to stand up to him and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to take a different approach that you, Mr. Trump, our client may not like, but might actually work better?
You know, obviously can't.
Sorry, are we talking to me or to?
I was going to let Jimena get in real quick, and then we'll get your last word.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I cannot speak to the inner workings of Trump and his discussions with his lawyers, but we have seen his lawyers take specific strategy, which lawyers questioning which witness. And I think his lawyers are very well aware that they aren't performing to the immediate cameras. You know, that happens outside the courtroom, literally in the hallway. Inside the courtroom, no cameras, no audio, but there is a jury. And I think that they are very aware that they are performing for that jury. And that's a jury of average New Yorkers, very kind of carefully picked out. Many of them reported that they don't really pay attention to the news that often. And so I think that they are aware that that is their audience in that moment, separate of the broader national base that they are also going out and talking to after the fact.
Michael, is it different performing for TV cameras like on Law and Order and a jury that's actually in the box?
Of course, because with a jury, you get immediate feedback. When you cross-examine someone and you leave them for dead, that's a phrase we use in the business. That means that it cannot be rehabilitated. The jury will tell you. And Trump will notice if his lawyers are being effective, jurors will actually nod. They will actually be with you, and you can feel it, and they'll give you permission to keep going at this person.
Love it. All right. Well, pop the popcorn, as you said, Michael. It's going to be wild next week. Jimena will be back with you as well. next week. In the body language of this, God, the opportunity, especially Jimena, you have to be able to be in the courtroom and see it and experience it is pretty cool. We appreciate both of you guys. Have a great weekend. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the National Democratic Convention, the DNC here in Chicago this summer, might make the 1968 convention look like the summer of love. The forces keeping Democrats from getting along when we come back.
Adulthood. That's why vaccines matter so much. For 40 years, Rotary and partners have delivered vaccines globally. Like here and even here, in your neighborhood and around the world, Rotary is ensuring children grow up safe from preventable diseases.
You can't escape a traffic jam. Know what else you can't escape? Seasonal allergies. And you might think you can avoid that coffee stain until... Oh, really? You can't escape a lot of things in life, but you can escape prediabetes. Prediabetes captures 1 in 3 adults. There are usually no signs of prediabetes. In fact, most people don't even know they have it. But with early diagnosis, you can change the outcome and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Take action by taking the 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. You might not be able to escape having this song stuck in your head, but you can escape prediabetes. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org today. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
DNC riots in 1968. Those were over the Vietnam War. This would be over the war in Gaza. In fact, the DNC are so worried about pro-Hamas types. Politico reports they might make their convention look something akin to the 2020 COVID hybrid lockdown production. From Politico's Jonathan Martin, as Democrats plan their convention, they'll have to address the elephant in the room: how to mitigate the threat of disruptions and work with a rookie mayor who unabashedly sympathizes with the protesters. The violent student protests over the past few months will look quaint when the world's media descends on Chicago for the DNC. And then there's the fact Chicago is about 2,000 police officers short to deal with this. Emmy Award-winning Chicago evening anchor at WGN, our partners here in Chicago, Ben Radley, is with us, also their chief investigative reporter. Nice to see you, my friend.
Nice to see you.
Welcome
back to Chicago.
It is good to be here. Is Politico overstating the problem?
I think there is a contingency for just about anything. They're worried about protesters not just outside of the convention, but also inside the hall as well. We've seen how wily demonstrators have become, and their ability to infiltrate presidential events, vice presidential events, or a convention is clear. You roll that into the fact that Brandon Johnson, Chicago's mayor, said in the last couple of days, I used to be one of those protesters. And you have this feeling of, we're not exactly sure what will be allowed or what won't be allowed. But,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point in terms of what will and will not be allowed. And you think about what was allowed in Chicago during 2020, the looting and sort of the mass chaos that was allowed here. Who makes the decision? Is it Brandon Johnson? Is it Governor Pritzker? Is it Joe Biden?
Well, there's layers of security. The Secret Service
they
has
own the United Center.
For the United Center. Look, nobody wants to have ugly scenes on the streets of Chicago, including Brandon Johnson. In fact, his administration is being sued for denying protesters the right to be close within earshot of the convention hall. Governor Pritzker, who likely has presidential aspirations of his own and worked very hard to get the convention here in Illinois, wants this to go off very well. But you have this odd scenario where you have Joe Biden, who may or may not put on a great performance in front of thousands. You have protesters who might interrupt because they may be delegates, so they may have a right to be inside the convention hall. And you better believe the DNC wants to script this as tightly as possible. Sure. And that includes the famous moments we've seen over the years where there's an open mic on the convention floor as each state announces who their delegates will go for.
Right, hence perhaps going to the 2020 model of the pre-produced video, something like that. It's interesting how far Chicago has come, right? Because in 2008, Chicago was united around their favorite son, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, his vice president. Take a listen.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer.
So how did Chicago, that in 2008 was really a place that rallied around Barack Obama and the Democratic Party, has now splintered in the way that it has?
Well, it's fair to say Chicago was high on hopium on that warm November night when Barack Obama, was speaking there. He was a favorite son.
Yep.
He was, there was a lot of pride. And there was a reason that was in Grant Park, because he believed in showcasing our city. Our politics are very different nowadays because we have fractures in both parties that are on full display. Back in just, a decade ago, under Obama, the party apparatus was able to keep those dissenting voices quiet. They're not able to do that anymore. And in fact, protest and interruption and flagrantly violating the norms has become the norm for both parties. That'll be on display in the Illinois State Capitol next week when Brandon Johnson and the Chicago Teachers Union, who got him there, are going to be busing teachers to the state capitol to yell and holler that they want more money from the Democrats who are in control in Illinois.
Wow. And I know that's actually a great scoop that you had. It's on WGN's website, and we're going to have you on next week to talk about that day. It's going to be wild to watch and to think about the taxpayers are paying for the teachers to go down there and do this. But it brings up a larger point, which is that suddenly not only is America's and the world's focus going to be on the convention, but it's going to be on Chicago, this city that I think, as much as you and I both love it, reasonable people can agree has had some really hard times. Boeing, Caterpillar, Ken Griffin's the Citadel, the largest investment firm, or one of them in the country, all relocated. Gun violence, people using guns here is still an enormous problem. And mass anger over the illegal immigrants that have come here by Democratic wards and areas of Chicago. Are you hearing any worries or any discussion about how do we make sure that whatever about Chicago is presented is the good parts?
The narrative. How do we control the narrative? And there will be a lot of effort on that. And there will be a lot of international and national media that will be led around by the nose on tours of Chicago, showing them the good things. They will point out that shootings and murders are at their lowest levels in 4 years here. But you'll also see those fractures on display. I mean, the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois don't particularly get along, even though they're from the same party. The other wild card, and you touched on it, is what Governor Greg Abbott out of Texas did last summer, and that is he flooded Chicago with undocumented immigrants. And the city, though we advertise ourselves as a sanctuary city, had no place to put them, and they were everywhere. Now, the number of migrants bused to Chicago way down. The question is, will Governor Abbott see an opportunity to catch some of that national attention by increasing the buses here to coincide with the convention?
Yeah, fascinating question. Ben will be here to cover it all. Good to see you, my friend, as always. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Have a great weekend. Over the past few years, we've been lucky enough to have Sam Rubin contribute here on the program and on NewsNation. Sam led entertainment reporting for our Nexstar owned and operated station, KTLA in Los Angeles. Nobody, I mean nobody, could bring an entertainment story to life like Sam. There he is with Harrison Ford. He called balls and strikes on the people he covered. He realized when to be serious about a topic, like when we recently talked about the raid on the rapper P. Diddy's house. He would talk about the taboo subjects of Hollywood, and he would cheer on programs like Yellowstone. Sam died this morning of a heart attack at his home. We will miss his laugh and his honesty and his insightful, scoop-filled reporting. Nexstar founder, chairman, and CEO Perry Sook said Sam was an icon in Los Angeles and the entertainment industry. He was a beloved member of our Nexstar Nation. My prayers are with his family and the KTLA family as we mourn his passing. He will be missed. We will miss Sam too, as I know you will as well. Sam Rubin was 64 years old. We'll be right back. In perhaps the least comforting statement in recent history, the FDA chief says bird flu risk to humans is low, but the agency is preparing. And they're spending money. Reuters reports today, U.S. to provide nearly $200 million to contain bird flu spread on dairy farms. Dean of Brown University School of Public Health, former White House COVID-19 response director, Dr. Ashish Jha is with us. Doc, thank you. I understand sort of saying, hey, don't worry, things are going to be okay. Risk is low. I also remember when COVID wasn't airborne from human to human, and for some reason, I don't take a lot of comfort in this, hey, it's going to be fine thing.
Yep. Hey, look, I never tell people don't worry. The way I look at it is, right now, we're not seeing this virus spread from people to people, so that's good news. That's the best news. It is a pretty serious virus. We are seeing it spread among cows. We are seeing it occasionally spread from cows to humans. We got to pay really close attention. We got to take this seriously. And that's what we're doing. And that's what the federal government should be doing. And everybody else should just be paying attention. But I don't think you have to do anything different with your life.
No, I think that makes sense, right? And there's this sense of deja vu, though, and this sort of like impending thing, right? That there's this virus out there. It involves animals. And we're hearing that it's so bad. But at the same time, there's not a lot of testing out there to know whether there's a bunch of humans who are carrying something that isn't that deadly, right?
Yeah, so that's actually the biggest challenge, is right now, and if you think back to January, February of 2020, the biggest problem we had is we didn't have much testing going on. We didn't know how much the virus was spreading. That is the challenge, again, right now. I do think we're in better shape. There's a lot of effort to get testing ramping up, happening on farms, in cows, but that should be our focus right now. Let's put our arms around this thing. Let's figure out how much virus is spreading.
Last question. How is it possible that in the early parts of 2020, testing was completely a huge problem, and now 4 years later, we have a virus that we've known about for a decade, and testing is still a huge problem?
Yeah, so in 2020, we didn't have the tests. We just couldn't test people. In 2024, the challenge is this virus is spreading on farms. Farmers have not been super excited about having their herds tested. Farm workers have been pretty hesitant to get tested. This is a solvable problem. I do think we're going to get testing up and running pretty quickly. We have the tests. We just have to help people understand testing is a good thing. It helps us get our arms around the virus.
Good points. Doctor, thank you very much. We appreciate the time, and also a little bit of hope that things are going to be okay. That's important to keep in mind. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you. This Sunday's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Mom, and to all the moms who are celebrating. I say this on a lot of Fridays. Take some time this weekend to spend time with the people you love. Call your mom. Say what's important, because there'll be a time in your life that you wish you had done it more.